Two sex things to talk about today that have come up over the past couple of weeks, actually, almost a month now, about 3 weeks. The first one is in North Carolina. We'll be discussing. The second one is in Skagit County, Washington State. So before we go through these, let's review a little bit about how these things often take place because we are reliant on the news reports that are in turn reliant on what the police, law enforcement, and these various agencies tell the press, which is not everything. For example, they never say beyond we had an undercover persona. Of course, that's problematic because of 18, I think 18 U.S. Code 2511 and others, not to mention every companion statute, which says that you have to have a warrant, you have to have probable cause, and you have before you can do any of these operations that amount to wiretapping. But of course, the courts have allowed police to trample on your Fourth Amendment rights, and in the name of trying to protect children. We all want to protect children, but all throughout human history, whenever police or the government goes too far, they justify trampling on your rights on the left in order for some big gain on the right. So the current motif is we got to protect children any way we can. Child predation is out of control, and therefore we can do whatever we want. And the courts seem very happy to let them get away with it, as do district attorneys, with very, very few exceptions. So to review what they do, first of all, is they go on these platforms and it just says online. It doesn't explain where, it just says online. Dating platforms, we don't know. And they first violate the terms of service for that particular platform by developing a fake persona or impersonating the picture of the person that they put in their ad. The picture is of an adult if they use a picture at all, or they don't list the age, but because you're on an adults only platform, this is what it states, and you rely on that assurance that it is in fact for an adult. The next thing they do is they chat you up. They approach you very often. They approach you. Remember, if you were an adult on there and you were going for children, why would you be on an adult only platform going after an adult? That seems odd. Wouldn't you be going after children? It would seem likely. And why wouldn't police then turn around and say, hi, I'm 14. I really have been interested in older men, and I'd like to talk to you about getting together, or at least just chatting. But they never do that. And why don't they do that? Because they want to reserve the right to twist things around the way they want. They maintain control of their turnkey system. So the next thing they do after they deploy this decoy persona in violation of federal and state impersonation laws is then they go after you, and they very often approach you, and they approach you with ads such as for military men, service for our boys in uniform, or they'll say twosome or threesome sex, or they'll say older with younger, or something like that, which doesn't necessarily mean children, but it attracts a certain fetishist out there. It's only later that they turn the tables on you and they say, oh, after we've seen frequently, after many dozens of messages, and they come back and they say, oh, by the way, I'm 14 or 15 or whatever. And by then you're caught up in it because you're thinking, what's going on now? Is this person playing a game? Because we've been role playing, we've been talking about, mother daughter stuff. What are we talking about? Then you ask for a picture, and the picture that you get is very often it's not a young person, it's an older person. It's somebody that could be young, but very often is older, and that creates the confusion, and I'm sorry, deepens the confusion and carries the conversation on longer because the police want to say later you were engaged with some kind of a minor and this was our persona, and you kept talking to the person after we sprung the magic words that this was a minor. Then eventually you get people who will say, I want to meet, or let's get together because I don't believe you. I'll see you for myself. Or very often we've seen people on here, they get on these sites when they're drunk, when they're high, when they're impaired in some way, and police don't care. They don't care about that. In fact, they love that because that lowers your inhibitions more and you do more. Notice how I'm explaining their techniques, and nowhere in here are we talking about people who deliberately began the entire conversation with the motive that they were going for children. That's not what these articles say. Then they spring the trap on you. They come and arrest you, even if you bail out, even if you go to meet them and you turn away, or they find out where you live because they've geolocated you, or whatever. You go near there, you go to the grocery stores, and you say, screw this, I'm not actually doing that. They arrest you anyway. They need your cooperation so that they can bolster those arrest records so that they can make it look very, very bad. And again, folks, you don't have to believe me. What you really need to do is also not believe these articles. We need the chat logs. We need to see the evidence. We need to see where this is occurring. We need to see why this is occurring like this. And we need to see what's actually being said on both sides. So let's look at Operation Millstone by the Invictus Task Force, which is a multiple sheriff department, U.S. Secret Service, and the criminal investigatory arm of the U.S. Army down in various counties in North Carolina. And over October 23rd through the 27th, they arrested 23 people. I want to point out a couple of things here that's kind of interesting. Um, it says that, let's see, Uh, the sheriff warns that these individuals often appear trustworthy, those who would contact our children online, but they're really not trustworthy. And so, with state bureaus and Homeland Security, they fanned out 19 agencies across North Carolina. They had SWAT teams and forensic examiners and criminal analysts, but nothing changes from that 5 point system that I very briefly outlined there, right? They said it's a constant battle for law enforcement. Safeguarding our youth, though, is a responsibility we must prioritize. Okay. And they mentioned that they caught teachers. They love to throw that out there too. And the highlighting the pervasive nature of the issue, whatever that is. And they arrested people ranging between the ages of 25 to 60 and talked about the investigations are ongoing. So this Invictus Task Force, right? What's curious too is this comment by the task force. Okay, there is no door, they say, we won't kick down, and no corner of this state that we won't search. Excuse me, to track down the dregs of society that prey on our children. On behalf of the Invictus Task Force, we extend our most sincere appreciation to all the sheriffs and chiefs for allowing their men and women to participate in this operation. Okay, again, we have no problem with protecting children, but we don't know because we only know what they told us in this report. We do know that they had, according to the report, these people arrested multiple undisclosed online apps to solicit sex acts. It doesn't even quite say sex acts from children in this particular line. Undisclosed online apps. What I take that to mean is the journalists didn't figure out what those online apps were, didn't apparently ask how they did it, didn't ask to see the chat logs, didn't ask to understand exactly how they went about law enforcement, that is, making this Operation Millstone absolutely work. And of course, the irony is, or not irony, but I guess Operation Millstone, you put a millstone around your neck and throw you into the river. It's very, very masculine. It's very, beat your chest. But what it doesn't do is tell the public, what are we really doing here? Were children really in danger? Because based on what I just told you from and shared on my channel from their own documentation, ICAC and ICAC operations here, they don't do what they say they're going to do, namely reactive stings mostly, where there's a tip that there's a child in need. Very few of those do they actually do. So we don't know how much bait and switch they actually did here in these North Carolina counties. We don't know if these men were actually looking for minors. The headline says 23 men arrested for meeting minors for sex in sting operations. According to this, there were no minors and they didn't meet them for sex. So again, the headline is misleading as well. We can go over here to Skagit County, and this occurred, their sting in Skagit, according to this article of yesterday's paper and a follow up today. Over a dozen people suspected during November 8th through 11th of sexually abusing and exploiting children. They were suspected of doing this, which would assume real children, right? If you were suspected of doing it. But then you read further, and no, they were charged with first and second degree rape and communication of a minor for immoral purposes, but they know that they're not going to get those to probably stick like that. They'll get a lesser charge, they'll get a plea deal. So, no minors, no one in danger, and we don't know what police did again. We don't know what they did. The primary crimes, they said proactively, the police proactively, Washington State Patrol proactively targeted persons involved in child abuse and exploitation. Well, how do you know if they were involved if it was a proactive approach? How do you know they were involved? And what does involved mean, involved in child abuse and exploitation via the internet? The primary crimes investigated. Well, hold on. Why are you conducting an investigation before you have probable cause? Proactively. How does that work? Well, if you read anything that we wrote in 2022 December to the General Accountability Office, their investigation of the ICAC sting operation had police officers saying that these people were guilty before they were ever arrested, before they were ever investigated. They were targeted as guilty parties without having any reason to suspect that they were guilty parties. Read the language of these things. The primary crimes were rape of a child, in parentheses, or attempted to, okay? And sexual exploitation of a minor through communication with a minor for immoral purposes, okay? I am hopeful that this operation will send a message and deter others from trying to use social media for their own deviant activities, Skagit County Prosecutor Rich Wayrick said in the Washington State Patrol officer's report. Well, so 14 people were suspected of committing one of those crimes I just mentioned. They were suspected of committing something proactively in advance before they were actually identified as an abuser. See if that makes sense. To the credit of the Northwest, my Northwest content editor, Julia Dallas, and the policy of the paper, they did not identify the people at first until they were charged, but they were identified here. Most were in their 30s from a variety of places around the Northwest area of the state, from Bellingham down to Renton and over to Seattle, etc. The agency added that the sting, dubbed Child Exploitation Operation, is spearheaded by the Washington State Patrol's Missing and Exploited Children Task Force, MECTF, which has been controversial in its connection with Operation Underground Railroad, OUR, Tim Ballard, and the bedraggled and beleaguered Utah Attorney General. Efforts like the child exploitation operation are remarkable because it intercepts adults who target children for sexual gratification, the Mount Vernon Police Chief Daniel Crispin said. Of course, we don't know that either because of all these tells that we just read through here and the 5-part turnkey system that this operation conducts routinely in order to ensnare people in these proactive stings without a tip under the assumption that they're attempting to exploit children on a site where they're looking for adult sex and adult operation. And the idea of a child was placed in their head by the ad or by switching around that this was an adult and then suddenly saying a child. You cannot believe these people and their chutzpah. You've got to read it to find out what's really going on, and you've got to look at the chat logs, which of course we don't have. We don't have it, so we don't know exactly what's going on. Now, they've conducted since August of 2015 348 arrests in the Northwest uh, United States. And according to Chief John Batiste of the Washington State Patrol, and I love this here, quote, "It warms my heart that when the call to protect and safeguard these precious lives goes out, so many federal, state, county, and local agencies answered to offer their assistance," end quote. It's ironic, isn't it, that we currently have people going up for confirmation in the next administration who have histories of child exploitation, of child endangerment, of credible, witnessed, reactive stings, you would think. And yet they will suffer no penalty. Some are running for the highest offices in the land and about to be appointed. And because they have connections, they have influence, they have money, and they have power, they're able to somehow get through this. It's interesting in Washington State too. In a follow-up article, it's curious that bail was set between 100,000 and $1 million per person, between 100,000 and 1 million, which means that you can't make the bail, which means that you sit in jail, which is a good thing from the jail standpoint because you get to keep paying every day you're in there. You pay for phone calls, you pay for commissary, and it helps the jail industrial and the prison industrial complex. For people who think I'm being too cynical or too clever by half, folks, Prison Policy Institute, many other groups are studying this and they know that to be the case. And if you think it isn't about the money, it is a battle royale to try to get anybody to reduce the fees in these jails, to have reasonable bail. I mean, a number of years ago, there was the, I think, Arizona decision. I'm trying to remember what the decision was in the U.S. Supreme Court, which said that the Eighth Amendment against excessive bail does, in fact, also apply to the states. And it would seem to me that 100,000 to $1 million is excessive bail. That was when Ruth Bader Ginsburg was still on the court. So it's been a few years now, but it's just astonishing to me that it's almost an act of desperation that we need to keep these people in there and we need to send a strong message. Curiously, though, they might want to start policing their own ranks because more and more we're finding vigilantes, police officers, special agents are who all have a badge and who have the cover of good guyness, not to mention the authority to do pretty much whatever they want under their own recognizance. They increasingly are the ones doing this exploitation. All right. And I'm not just talking about Tim Ballard, I'm talking about the Washington Post um, investigation. I'm talking about the database at the Ohio University, I think it's Bowling Green State, that tracks these things. It's extraordinary. The unmitigated and unrestrained hypocrisy that goes out there. And again, not saying that people aren't trying to exploit children. I'm saying we don't know. We don't know because we can't see what they're doing. And this language, you would think that these people writing this would ask some very clear questions on this, but we do know that police decide that they're going to get somebody and that there's somebody's are going to be victims. Excuse me, they are victims, but they're going to be um, fingered in advance as somebody who is um, guilty of a crime before they even have a chance to have a crime. They're automatically targeted as somebody who committed a crime proactively somehow. This is Norman Michaelation for ICAC Unpacked. Please get educated. Please push this out to people who need to know. Please, if you're on these sites, as soon as they switch it up, as soon as something odd happens, immediately disengage. It'll be curious to see how desperate police get as they try to figure out a way to boost those numbers up. And my guess is they'll start coming after people even when you disengage earlier in the conversation. This is Norman Michaelation, ICAC Unpacked for the 20th of November, 2024. Be safe out there. Have a good day.